Thank you, Elaine, very much. Thank you, Basil and Christina and everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. It's our honor to be here and to have the opportunity to share with you what we have been learning from each other and from people like you over the past 15 years. We came together because of 9/11 at one level, but at a deeper level, we came together because 9/11 reminded us that we live in a very troubled world. And we shared an intuition, we discovered, that if we could penetrate the barriers that have historically divided us, we might be able to reach a point of reconciliation and be able to cooperate on the great moral issues that we are facing. One of the most poignant illustrations of the way the world is comes from the first sentence of Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled. Anybody remember? He said, life is difficult. He didn't say it's impossible or bad, but the word difficult suggests the need for focus and intention, and we would say spiritual practice. And so we have come to believe very deeply through our friendship that interfaith dialogue can be one of the tools that we can use to recover from the great terrors and sufferings that the world is experiencing today. Again, thank you for coming.
That was good.
Thanks.
I was just thinking, looking at Peter's lights, the very first creative act is Yehi Or, let light be, and I always wondered what that light looked like. And I'd like to imagine that it looked like that. A great image. We start with sharing two basic assumptions, which kind of underlie all the work we do together. The first assumption is that every authentic spiritual path is an avenue to a shared universal. And when any path thinks it owns the universal, we're all in trouble. And that trouble will always manifest at some level violently. It may start with a psychological violence, but ultimately it will unfold as a physical violence. The other assumption has to do with the nature of the spiritual path. We've come to believe that spirituality is not a what. Spirituality is a who. Awakening spiritual consciousness is an awakening to the fuller identity that yearns to be met within each and every one of us. Spiritual awareness allows us to rise to a level of inclusivity. In fact, the more connected we experience ourselves to be with each other and with our planet, the greater the degree of our spiritual consciousness. In my tradition, Moses asked a question no one else ever asked, and that was to ask God what God's name was. And the answer was telling. Moses said, I'm going to go down and I'm going to talk to the slave people and try to convince them that there is a way out of that enslavement. And they're going to say, who sent you? Who shall I tell them sent me? And the answer is immediate, Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh. I am as I am. Which is this incredible insight that if we're speaking about unitive, if we're speaking about oneness, the only possible pronoun to use is first person singular. Because every other pronoun assumes and demands a polarity. Every he demands a she, every you demands a me, every we demands a they. It's the I, the absolute unlimited identity. It's the universe opening its eye. So we believe that spirituality has to do with the awakening through our own individual eye to expanding levels of inclusivity as we strive together to remember the one we are.
Thank you, brother. My friends, there are a couple of Quranic verses I'd love to articulate. One says that if Allah wanted, God could have made all of us one single community. But out of a divine design, God chose to create diversity in languages, in colors, and nations and tribes, men and women, for one primary reason. And this has become like a mantra in the world of interfaith. And the words are that you might come to know the other on a human level. In Central Asia, we say, can we share 3 cups of tea? Listen, respect, connect. And the idea is not to convert the other or force the other to your point of view. The essential idea, the critical idea is, can I repeat, connect on a human level? Can I share stories, human stories? You know that wonderful saying, this universe is not made out of atoms. It's made out of stories. And this requires humility, sincerity, persistence, patience, and creativity. You know, we've traveled a great deal and we meet many programs, particularly Abrahamic alliances, which meet intermittently. And here's the complaint. Here's the criticism. That at these meetings, these gatherings, the talk and the behavior is absurdly nice. But once it's over and they go home, Muslims become terrorists, Christians become liars, Jews become occupiers. Unless we have created the environment where even some people, they connect with the other on a human level. They become friends. So what happens? Well, if you connect on a human level, the tendency to dehumanize, demonize, becomes significantly lower. Then even if there are differences, now it no longer looms as a threat. And the third thing is very important, that it seems to create a space and an energy where now we can, because we have connected, we can focus on projects which are dear to both of us. Social justice issues and earth care projects. So I'd love to end with a quotation by my favorite sage, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, who never wrote, he just uttered. He uttered, "Oh God, you have created this I, you, we, they, to play the game of adoration with yourself. We should play this game more often."
So we started working together shortly after the tragedy of 9/11. And we started working together because the consequences of that horrible event demonstrated how far we are from peaceful solutions to the world's problems.
We wanted to find out why it was that interfaith dialogue had not been able to bring us to a place of reconciliation, healing, and cooperation.
So we started the way many interfaith dialogues begin. We brought to each other our sacred texts.
Let's try again.
This is my commandment
That's how it was the first 3 years. The truth of the matter is that it is challenging to allow ourselves to experience the wisdom in another's tradition. Many of us, whether we are conscious of it or not, have fears of having our own identity diminished or diluted. Many of us question whether we can maintain our own affiliation, our own identity, if another's tradition has wisdom as well. So we strive to share in a way that can awaken us to the deep wisdom in each other's faiths, because we continue to discover that the more we awaken to the treasures we each bring, the deeper we are able to appreciate our own roots. What I was trying to share before I was rudely interrupted are the lines from the 8th century BCE, before the Common Era prophet named Micah, speaking to the northern kingdom of Israel, speaking as many prophets did to people who had forgotten that ritual was meant to support ethical action in the world rather than simply to be done for its own sake. And he said, Higid lecha adam ma tov, uma Adonai doresh mimcha, it has been told you, humankind, what is good and what the Eternal One asks of you. Ki im asot mishpat, nothing other than doing justly, va'ahavat chesed, and loving kindness, v'hatznea lechet im Elohecha, and walking with integrity in the presence of your God. Often that's translated walking humbly, but it's not meant to encourage us to diminish ourselves. It's meant to allow ourselves to be honest and to be open and to discover more deeply the one we are.
Thank you, Brother Ted. And before I was so rudely interrupted, I was reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 15, beginning at verse 12. This is part of the conveyance of Jesus' wisdom to the disciples right before Jesus was crucified, when he says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you follow my suggestions. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from God. You did not choose me, but I chose you."
Thank you, brother. I'll have some trouble reading. I forgot to bring my reading glasses. But I do this deliberately, so I can use my third eye and impress you, actually. Idfa billati hiya ahsanu fa'iza allazi ba'inaka wa ba'inahu ad'awatan ka'innahu waliyun hamim. The words mean repel evil with something which is better, so that your enemy becomes an intimate bosom friend. So you see, all of our traditions have such beautiful words, ageless, timeless. So what is the problem? The problem, of course, is living them is so very inconvenient. Okay. So brothers, all of our traditions have wonderful teachings that overlap, but there might be a core teaching which might be special to our particular tradition. Let's go over them individually.
We believe that the core teaching of Judaism is the evolving understanding of the nature of oneness, where at the beginning that one was imagined to be one among many, and then that one was seen as the only efficacious one outside ourselves. As our consciousness evolved, we were able to understand that that one was not only outside as an absolute transcendent being that contains all else, but that one awakens as well within each and every being according to the capacities of our consciousness. And more, that one awakens between us when we meet beyond the facade, when we drop the masks of our individual persona and realize that the one who is looking at me through your eyes and the one who is looking at you through my eyes is the same one. When we begin to understand that we live in a field of oneness, and that oneness demands ethical action in the world, not as a rule, but as a reality, where the golden rule becomes the golden reality because we are aware that when we support one another, we are in fact supporting ourselves and all others. And when we cause pain to another, we are causing pain to ourselves, adding more pain to the world. We believe that the core teaching in Jewish tradition is the evolving awakening to the wonder of one.
Thanks, Brother Ted. It's important from my point of view to remind us that everything in Jesus' ministry would have been within that framework. Jesus was not a Christian.
You tell us.
I know. He was not only Jewish, but a rabbi, a teacher, a healer. In Christianity, we have agreed that the core teaching is unconditional love, loving without conditions. In Christianity, the word grace comes as close as anything, but it fails, I think, to remind us or to evoke that sense of loving without conditions. How many of us have ever really done that? After all, when we form relationships or fall in love, we do it because of conditions. And they're conditions that please the ego. But as we grow together, ideally, we come to a place where we can love without those conditions. In other words, no matter what. It's a feature of forgiveness. The parable, the prodigal son, really evokes that so well, that kind of forgiveness, which my colleagues have reminded me. Forgiveness is the ability to let go of the need to have the past be any different from the way it was. Very, very difficult. But this was part of what Jesus was trying to do, is to help us employ that.
Thank you, brother. And the core teaching in Islam is compassion. I'm not saying that all Muslims are following that. I'm not saying that all non-Muslims are following that. The Quran has 114 chapters, and virtually each one starts with this invocation called the Basmallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means in the name of God, who is boundlessly compassionate and infinitely merciful. So there's a story that a Bedouin once went to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and asked, what is the meaning of this, the secret meaning of it? How can I have the Basmallah be bestowed upon me? And the Prophet famously replied, this is the secret. Be compassionate with yourself and be compassionate with others. So in Islamic spirituality, This is considered the main provision, the main practice to understand, to cultivate, and to practice. And so these teachers, they are very eager to explain again and again and again the power, the majesty, the beauty of this divine quality, compassion. And like in other traditions, they explain it through the metaphor of water in nature. There is nothing as soft and yielding as water is. Yet, for overcoming the hardest, the most insurmountable, we know there's nothing as powerful as water is. It washes away continents, meaning the person who is most gentle, kind, merciful, is really possessed of authentic strength. Then the Quran suggests very clearly, wherever water falls, life flourishes. Meaning, the person who is gentle and compassionate and merciful is also possessed of qualities that are life-affirming, life-bestowing. So once again, I'll end with quotation from Uncle Rumi, who utters, "How should spring bring forth a garden on hard stone? Become earth, so you may grow flowers of many qualities." Just for the sake of experiment once, become earth, for you have been a heart-breaking rock.
So how is it with these teachings of oneness, teachings of unconditional love, teachings of compassion, that we are in the shape we are in and our world is in the shape it's in?
And we believe we're in the shape we're in, the world's in the shape it's in, because we have gone astray. We have drifted from the substance of our own core teachings.
And my friends, this is the pattern of history. And I love that saying from the sages, we learn from history that we do not learn from history. But the good news is, there have always been sages who have called us back.
In Jewish tradition, those who called us back were the prophets who were witnessing what we were unwilling to see in our own behavior. It was Amos, it was Amos, again, thousands of years ago, who spoke words that are still waiting to be realized. When he said, "Let justice roll down like waters, righteousness like an ever-flowing stream."
And Jesus, functioning in that same Jewish prophetic tradition, sought to bring forward the Hebrew concept of chesed, which is translated as steadfast love, loving kindness, and I think now would include unconditional love.
And the Prophet Muhammad, he called us back from the worship of the ego, that little self that idolizes money and power. So in the 7th century, in the Arabian Peninsula, he declared, "La ilaha illallah," meaning there is no God but God, which essentially means make not the ego, but divinity the center of your life.
But the reality is that the paradigm is shifting in our day. It used to be that we needed to await someone on the outside to rise to call us back, to remind us of our forgetting. We believe that we've reached the stage in our own spiritual maturity where we need to take responsibility for calling ourselves back, where we need to awaken to the way the world is manifesting the difficulties that we are participating in, so that we can call ourselves back to the preciousness and the clarity of our own core teachings.
We believe that interfaith dialogue, whether between and among people who would actually use the word faith, but also between and among people who might not use that specific word. Interfaith dialogue can bring us to a place where we can be enabled to strengthen our spiritual identities and to have a view into this important future. But we must learn to really, really communicate effectively.
Brothers, it is really critical, given the magnitude of the global problems, that we go beyond these chasms, this polarization, and really engage, as you said, in this dialogue. And this interfaith dialogue, it's really a matter of our survival. Let's go over the 6 stages that we have discerned.
We actually found 5 stages until our 3rd book. We had trouble with 5 stages because when you present 5 stages with 3 people, how do you divide it up? Fortunately, we found a 6th stage, so we're safe now. The first stage, the first thing that happens usually when groups come together is they either focus on their similarities or their differences. And we discovered in our travels that neither of those approaches is really adequate to lay a foundation for deepening dialogue and effective collaboration. We believe that the first stage is creating contexts in which we can meet each other as human beings, creating context where we can share our stories rather than becoming experts right away in our religious traditions. And we believe the second stage, following that, is sharing what we consider to be the core teaching in our tradition. And if we don't have a tradition, what's the core teaching in our lives? What do we use as the beacon against which we can measure the important decisions and choices that we make? The first stage is sharing stories. The second stage is really looking at what we consider to be the core, the beacon.
And the third stage, in the context of these first 2, is an invitation, we feel, to look at the verses and practices in our own traditions and decide which ones are consistent with our core teaching, and even more importantly in some ways, which verses and practices are inconsistent with our core teaching. That requires a high level of critical thinking and confidence for us as spiritual beings. The fourth stage, then, is an opportunity, an invitation, having gone through these first 3, to then start conversations about the more difficult topics. And for us, as you can imagine, one of them is the problem of the conflict between the people of Israel and the people of Palestine.
I don't want to talk about it.
So, but that requires a very high level of trust, or a deep level of trust, that we feel can be made manifest through these first 3 stages.
And the 5th stage, if you've done the 4 stages, is awareness that maybe all religions are paths to a shared universal. I'm a Muslim. I'm rooted in Islam. But when I'm open to the beauty and wisdom of other traditions, this waters my own Islamic roots. This has been my experience. And I find that this not only makes me a better Muslim, but also a more developed, a more complete human being. Which is why we say interfaith is not about conversion. It is about completion, becoming a more developed, complete human being. And if people have fear, we always say, use your being as the laboratory. See what happens when you engage in this practice. And the 6th stage is the need to use spiritual practices to become a more developed, a more complete human being, to transform my ego, to open up my heart so I can become more aware, more mindful, more compassionate, more loving, more inclusive. This work is critical. The three of us, we went not too long ago to Japan to be signatories on a document called the Fuji Declaration. There have been some people in Japan for years, including Nobel laureates, academicians, scientists, religious people, atheists, agnostics, all pondering this question: what is it we can do collectively? What is urgently needed so we can truly heal the planet and work for the common good? So what is interesting is they came up with this declaration, the Fuji Declaration, and the first words are that it is critical we affirm the divine spark which exists in every human heart and mind, and make an intention to live by its light in every sphere of our existence. That's the first declaration. So in Islam, there's a wonderful utterance where the mystics say, "You are a ruby. You are a ruby in the midst of granite. How long will you continue to deceive us? For we can see the look in your eyes. So please return to the root of the root of the root of your real self." This is the spiritual work.
Thanks, Jamal. So here's the key. Those are the 6 stages. We invite you to think about that progression of things and how important it is. But the key is to become vulnerable enough to share the parts of our own traditions where we ourselves have gone astray.
And we believe that we have gone astray in a multitude of ways. We believe that in each of our traditions we go astray when we promote exclusivity. We think we go astray when we promote the violence, often in the name of that exclusivity. We believe that our traditions go astray when we promote the inequality of men and women. We believe that our traditions go astray when we promote homophobia. We believe our traditions go astray when we, in one way or another, support the racial inequality, the economic inequality that exists in our culture, and we believe that we go astray when we do not take adequate care of the planet that gives us our life.
So brothers, how healing, how empowering it is if we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable and then engage not in truth of convenience, but what we really feel is the truth. Wouldn't you say the biggest problem we have is this umbrella, this overarching problem of exclusivity?
Brother Jamal, I hear you say that. But in all honesty, I have to tell you that we Jews are the chosen people. From among all the peoples of this world, we are God's treasured people. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2.
Excuse me, Rabbi. Gospel of John, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God except by me."
Not my Bible.
Brothers, here is the real truth. The Quran says, whoever chooses religion other than Islam, it will not be accepted of him, and he will be one of the losers in the hereafter. Chapter 3, verse 85. For your sake, please make a note of it.
That's it. How much of the time engaging in interfaith dialogue, we suddenly reach a point where old beliefs surface, and we suddenly find ourselves at odds with one another, unless we recognize such moments are symptoms of our straying.
And when we realize that this really is an invitation for us to grow, to unclench our minds, to open our hearts, so that we can be of authentic service to humanity.
So our straying then gives us an opportunity to open our hearts to the needs and lives of other people, to grow spiritually and to strengthen our spiritual identity so that we may penetrate the barriers and find ways to cooperate and appreciate.
So we believe, for example, that it's not that the Jews aren't the chosen people, but the Jews are chosen for the way of Torah. Christians are chosen for the way of Jesus. Muslims are chosen for the way of the Quran. Every authentic people are chosen for the integrity of their own way, and more than that, each and every one of us is chosen. But we are chosen to be the one we are, to discover the deeper integrity and the deeper gifts of our own being, to celebrate them and to express them in our world.
When Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," which has been one of the verses that Christian people have used to claim superiority over all other religions, a negative aspect of Christianity. I believe that Jesus was not saying that he himself was the way. Remember, Rabbi Ted said, the name of God revealed to Moses is being, I am. And remember, this verse begins with this word, and know also that in Hebrew and Aramaic, the to be verb in the present tense is understood, but not written or spoken. So this verse could be understood as I am is the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, God is the way, the truth, and the life. No spiritual teacher would speak from that narrow place of ego, of self-identification, but rather from a place of broader spiritual wisdom.
My friends, I know you made a note of 385. You might be surprised to hear that 384, the verse just preceding that, is probably one of the most inclusive verses of the Quran. It says, the verse says, we believe in what has been revealed to us, but we also honor and believe in what has been revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes, and what has been revealed to Moses and to Jesus, and we make no distinction between them. You see, 385, when it was first revealed, Islam was not even a religion. What does Islam mean? Islam means to surrender in peace. But what are you surrendering? You're surrendering your attachment to your ego so that you can bring a heart turned in devotion to God. So this verse is saying, it doesn't matter what your religion is. If you don't do this work of Islam, of surrendering your ego, you will be loser here and in the hereafter.
We need to remember that spirituality is always inclusive. Spirituality reminds us of the absolute interconnectedness of all being.
Spirituality embraces the parts of us afraid to embrace.
There's a wonderful verse in the Quran that says, every so way you turn is the face of Allah. It's all one.
And we'd like to conclude with the Interfaith Amigos theme song. You probably guessed that we have a theme song. It contains Arabic, Hebrew, and English. The Arabic. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, in the name of God, boundlessly compassionate, infinitely merciful. La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God. It's all one. And the Hebrew is Adonai Hu Ha-Elohim Hu. The absolute transcendent one awakens within each one of us as our God. That is the one. And the English?
The English is, it's all one, and I am as I am, which means it's all one, and I am as I am. It
took him a long time to figure that out.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallahu. La ilaha illallahu. Adonai hu ha-Elohim hu. Adonai hu ha-Elohim hu. It's all one and I am as I am. It's all one and I am